We're going to start creating a platform game today. And so in order to get started, you're going to need to have some resources to work with. And so inside the platform games folder, you should find a resources folder that's got lots of stuff here. I'll put it in the list format. All this stuff is what you're going to need to work on this project. Okay, let's go ahead and open up Game Maker. And let's start off by saving this file, and we'll save it inside our platform games folder. So if you start at your desktop, go into your game design folder, go into your platform games folder, and we'll save it. We'll call it H6, your last name platform, and then save. Okay, for phase one, we're going to set up a really simple room with a character. Actually, it's just going to be a ball that you can move back and forth and jump, and it's going to have gravity, so we'll talk about that. But it's very, very simple, not much to it. So to start off with, we need two sprites. First sprite we need, we're going to click the load sprite button, and we're going to grab the ball sprite. Looks like a volleyball. Go ahead and remove the background and click OK, or click open. And default settings are fine. We'll change the name though to SPR_ball. Click OK. Second sprite we need is the sprite called block. And if you have remove background checked, it's going to be invisible. So uncheck that. It's just a black square. That's all it is. 16 by 16. Click open. Everything is fine on this. Click OK. Or sorry, sorry. We'll change the name. SPR_block. Click OK. All right. Let's create our first object. And the first object we'll create is the block. So obj_block. It has a sprite, which is sprite block. It's solid, and that's it. It doesn't do anything. It just sits there and acts solid. Okay, click all right, click OK. And next, let's do the object ball. So obj_ball, and we'll attach the ball sprite. It's not solid. Let's go ahead and move into the events. First, we're going to have a step event. And what we want to do in the step event is check whether this ball is currently in the air. Because if it's in the air, we need to turn on gravity and pull it back down. And if it's not in the air, we need to turn off gravity and make sure gravity doesn't affect it. So here's how we're going to do that. First of all, here's a nice feature. If you go down to your control tab, you'll see under code, there's a yellow yield sign with an exclamation point, and it says comment. If I drag that out, this isn't an action per se. It doesn't really do anything, but it does allow me to put a line of text in here that will remind me what this section of my code does, or what this section of actions does. So I'm just going to type in here, check whether in the air. See how it shows up there? Doesn't do anything, but it just reminds me that this next section is about checking whether it's in the air. That's useful when some of this code gets a little complicated and you're not quite sure by looking at it what it's doing. Okay, this will be a nice clue. All right. First, let's check for a collision-free area, and that's this one right here under the Control tab. Top left corner says check empty. Drag that out, and we're going to use our self in the applies to, and we're going to look at the position that is 0 for x and y for 1. We're going to look for solid objects and relative to our current position. So what we're looking for is if number 1, if 1 on the y value, okay, relative to our current position, which would mean, you know, positive numbers on y are moving down the screen. So this is checking 1 pixel beneath us. If that's empty, then we are in the air, right? If there's nothing underneath us, then we're in the air. So that's what we're checking. If that's true, let's pull out some blocks here, because I always want you to use the blocks even if there's only one action. Technically, if there's just one action after one of these if statements, the octagon shapes, you don't need the blocks, but it's a good idea to put them in there visually it helps you understand that this is the if block, the if section. Okay, so if this is true, then we want to turn gravity on. If we're floating in the air, we're going to turn on gravity. So let's go back to move, and it's the blue arrows pointing down that says set gravity. So we drag that in between the blocks, and we're going to set the gravity direction to 270, which is straight down, and we're going to set the gravity value to 0.5. All right, it's not relative, it's an absolute value. All right, and then we're going to go back to control, and we're going to drag out an else, and then another couple of blocks here. Okay, if we're floating in the air, set the gravity. If we're not floating in the air, we still want to set the gravity. We just want to set it direction of 270, set the gravity to 0. And that just guarantees that if we're touching something, if we're standing on a solid surface, then we want the gravity turned off. Okay, let's drag out another comment, because the next thing we want to do is, if your character is up in the air and falls down the length of the whole room, the gravity at 0.5 is going to cause it to constantly speed up. And that'll create an awkward situation if it starts falling too fast. So we want to, in the step event, check the speed of our character, the vertical speed, constantly. And if that speed ever gets over 12, we're going to reset it to 12. So that puts a cap on the vertical speed so the character never falls faster than 12. So we'll put this in here. This comment is going to say, limit the vertical speed. Okay, so what we'll do here is we'll check a variable. If variable vSpeed, that's the vertical speed variable. This is a variable that GameMaker already knows about and keeps track of for every object. If it's 12 is the value, and we're checking to see if it's larger than 12. If that's the case, let's drag out a couple of blocks here. If that's the case, then we want to set that value, set vSpeed to 12. Okay, so there it is. That'll set a cap on vertical speed. We'll never get faster than 12. Okay, let's define what happens if we collide with a block. Okay, if we collide with a block, there's an interesting thing that can happen in GameMaker, and that is if there's a collision, GameMaker will sometimes move the character object, or whatever is moving that's causing the collision, move it one pixel back or one move back to prior to the collision. And this is to prevent it from continuing to have a collision. In this case, we don't want that to happen because it can result in the character object appearing to float just barely above the ground. And we don't want that. We want to make sure that there's contact. So we're going to use kind of a strange action here. If there's a collision, we want to move to contact here, and it's this one here. Move to contact, and we drag this over, and the direction we want to move is whatever our current direction is. Okay, so if we touch a block, we want to continue to move in that direction. We're going to put a maximum of 12, meaning I think that means at most we'll move 12 pixels, but it's not going to affect anything, I guess, in this game. But so move in the current direction up to 12 pixels and against solid objects. Click OK. So that's going to stick us to the wall or the floor or whatever it is, so that it actually looks like there's contact there. And we want to set the vertical speed to 0. Okay, make sure we're not moving past the block or anything like that. Vertical speed is 0. Those are the two things we're going to do in the collision. Okay, next we want to set up our keyboard event. So we want to give the player the ability to move left and right, and then also to jump. So let's go add our keyboard left. And here's how we'll handle this. We're going to check empty again. So we're going to check if there's an empty place we can move to. And the position we want to check is negative 4x. Remember, we're moving left, which is this direction. And so moving this way in our game room, x would be decreasing in value. So remember, the top left corner of your room is 0, 0. So if we're moving this way, we're moving towards 0. So from our current position, we're going to check negative 4 on x and 0 on y, because we're not checking up or down, we're just checking our left position. Checking for solid objects, and this is relative to our current position. Okay, if that position just to our left, negative 4, is collision free, then we want to go ahead and move there. We're going to do it by jumping. So we're going to jump to position, and we're going to jump to that position we just checked, negative 4x, 0, relative to our current position. Click OK. And that is it. If it's open, we move there. Now we're going to do the same thing for our right keyboard, but we're going to move positive 4 and check positive 4. So let's just make it easy on ourselves. Instead of typing all that in again, let's right click on this and duplicate the event. Now obviously you can't have two events that are left keyboard, but we can click on keyboard and do right. And now our left and right are identical. So on the right keyboard event, let's go in here and just get rid of that minus sign. And again, on the jump to position, get rid of the minus sign and click OK. All right, left and right should be good to go. The final one is the up keyboard event. And this is how we're going to jump. And so what we'll do here is we want to first of all check that we are touching the ground, because if we're not touching the ground, we shouldn't be able to jump. Otherwise, what you end up with is a character that can jump into the air and then keep hitting the jump button, and they can jump higher and higher and higher while they're floating. Which, if you were doing a game where you had swimming, that might make sense, but not in a game where you're jumping in the air. So let's check. Go to the Control tab. We're going to check for a collision. If there's a collision between x0 and y1, which is right below us, relative to our current position, if there's a solid object there right below us, that means that we are on the ground and we are okay to jump. So we'll drag out a couple of blocks, and we will, in this case, set the vertical speed to -10. All right, now you might be thinking, okay, so then are they just going to fly up into the air and float all the way to the ceiling? No, because as soon as they leave the ground, gravity will kick in. And that gravity with a force of 0.5 will start to pull back on them. And so they'll jump only so high, they'll start to fall back down to the ground. And then when they touch the ground, they'll stick on it. Okay? So that's it. That should work. So let's click OK. We need to set up a room. So let's just really quickly here, we're going to place some blocks on the floor. Oh, let's undo that. Let's change our grid to 16 by 16. And down here, I'll hold down the Shift key and paint some blocks on the floor. We'll paint the wall as well. Okay, we will place our ball right down here on the ground, and then we'll click the check mark, save it, and run it. And here we go, left and right, and if I jump, perfect. Okay, I can hold the key button down and try to jump over and over again, but I never jump into the air higher than gravity allows. And I can jump up against the wall, and everything works. Okay, so that's the super most basic version. That's phase 1. The next thing that we'll do is we'll add some better graphics and some backgrounds and make it look more like a game.